of the more interesting underground rappers of the past 10-ish years or so has been Kweli. He's put out some really good albums, such as Ghost at the Finish Line, his collaboration album with Jean Grey, which really highlighted how strong he is as a rapper, but also Jean Grey, who's also been pretty underrated and overlooked for a bit too long at this point. Then last year we had Guns, which I didn't like that much to begin with, but only grew on me as the year went by, as I started to appreciate a lot of the production and a lot of Kweli's rapping on that one. I found a lot of what he was doing pretty clever and pretty smart. His wordplay for the most part was really some of his best to date, actually, I think. And yeah, it was a weird little growth that the album had on me, but I'm glad it eventually did click, and Straight Shot being on there, one of my favorites of the 2010s period, and by far and away I think his best song ever. This new album here is with Chris Key's Innocent Country 2, which is the sequel to 2015's Innocent Country, an album that I don't enjoy all that much, to be honest, but even still, in the grander scheme of his discography, it's not one that people gravitate towards or even bring up at all. So I was definitely interested to see where he'd take this new one, as it is a sequel. And over the course of these 5 years, I mean, he's been all over the place with his releases. He's incredibly prolific. This is back-to-back years since 2017 with a brand new release. I think that's impressive. And as a sequel, it definitely offers something different to what the 2015 album brought to us. The production is completely different. This is some of the most beautiful production Quelle has rapped over ever, actually. It really is remarkable how these beats are just so beautiful at times. Like, Jesus Christ, the piano that is incorporated across these tracks is just gorgeous. This entire album, honestly, is like just picking out the entire discography of Uwama Hiroto's and saying that we're taking all of those beats and we're rapping over them. It's soulful. It's also got the abstract hip-hop edge that Quelle has been known to do up until this point, and any other rapper on the mellow music group label. The abstract edge, I would say, holds this album back, because a lot of the time Quelle is sort of the weakest element of a lot of the tracks here. I know that probably won't go down too well with a lot of people that are loving this album, and that's totally okay, but I am usually enamored with beats and the production and some of the hooks and even some of the guest features that come on this album, which kind of overshadow Chris himself at points. Which reminds me actually of how people reacted to the Injury Reserve self-titled album that came out last year, which was amazing to my ears and was my second favourite album of the entire year. But a lot of people said similar things of how the production was often better than what Richie and Groggs were doing, and the features that came on, like Freddie Gibbs, Peggy, everyone else that came on, you know, people would just say that those were the best parts of the album. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I am saying that same thing about this album here, which is a huge shame, because Chris, man, on his best, can provide so much that I love. That's not to say I think he's bad, but when you read into some of the lyrics, I'm kind of not really following along with what he's kind of talking about. He kind of meanders a little bit. There's a little bit of a similar thing to what Milo does on a lot of his work, which isn't as extreme as Milo, because Milo's kind of just like darting around, throwing any thought that comes to his mind just, you know, seamlessly, whereas Chris isn't quite like that, but it is similar in the sense that there isn't a major like theme tying some of the tracks together, which is a shame. I mean, Black Twitter is a track that obviously goes against that, as you obviously have a pretty narrow, straightforward approach to a track. And I say narrow because the way that the guest features come on the track and how Quelle raps as well is incredibly straight to the point and basic, and doesn't really go into detail with a lot of things. A repetition of using the word black and talking about black things. It's a nice celebratory track for sure. I think it does what it does well, but it kind of needs variation. It kind of needs moving forward onto something different, because it gets pretty redundant to my ears. Nonsensical refrain, I guess you could call it a refrain on Living Happy, where the feature is just kind of repeating words and words. It says butterflies, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Again, it just kind of takes away from how good the production sounds. And Quelle Chris on this track as well is just kind of muffling with his rapping. He does that a lot on this album. I just kind of want to hear his voice break free. He has been like that across his career, but he isn't as muffly across those albums as he seems to be on this one. He kind of gets buried a little bit. The lo-fi aesthetic sort of swallows him at times. The point where I was actually kind of desperate for the lyrics sheet to be attached to the Apple Music album, which a lot of albums tend to have the lyrics following along with the tracks, but for some reason I guess this isn't that huge of an album, so it didn't have it, so I had to go to like Genius and read along with some of the lyrics, because I was struggling to make out some of what he was saying. At least later on though, we do get that really good Earl feature. I think that track offers something quite different to some of the other tracks, kind of like the straight shot of the album, I suppose you could call it, with the posse cut of, you know, having different people coming on and the extended extravagant instrumental backing it up. It isn't as grandiose as I think it is aiming to be, but it is a nice track nevertheless. And then you've got Meryl Garbus's contributions, which is the Tuneyards front woman, who got a bit of flack for their last album, so I feel as though she's come back here on this album with these features, redeeming herself massively. Honestly, like, god damn, the singing she provides is heavenly. Sacred Safe, the goddamn hook on that thing, and then Graphic Bleed Out, she just brings a beauty. Oof, she perfectly fits this album. Like, these beats were made for her voice. It is just a match in heaven, to be honest. Like, I would love to see these two come together more and more as time goes on. Even like a full-on album where she contributes to like most of the songs, I think I'd be okay with that. As you can tell though, I'm darting around with the negatives and the positives here, and I guess I may as well bring up something else that's pretty negative. Quelle Chris's delivery at times doesn't demand that much attention. As I've already mentioned, he's kind of buried, but not only that, he doesn't really sound like he's emphasizing much of his lyrics. He's kind of just speaking them in this monotone voice, which just doesn't interest me at all. Again, this isn't something that he did on Guns. I think there were a few tracks where his expressive voice came through in such a great way. Like, he was cartoonish at times. He kind of brought in a different side of him, which I think ended up growing on me more and more as I went back to it. And here I'm just not getting that as much. Bottle Black Power by The Business is a really odd moment for me on this album, because does anyone else think this sounds almost like Obamacare? Like, the beat is near enough the same. It sounds just like a watered down version of that, and I don't know, man. It's a strange moment for me. I was really kind of taken aback by that beat. Not only because it doesn't really fit on the album, but it just kind of sounds like a rehash of something he's done in the past, to a considerably worse degree, may I add, because this honestly just sounds like a demo beat version of Obamacare. I don't know. This was a weird track for me. It just kind of strips back what made that song so good. It didn't really have that same impactful hook. The lyrics aren't really as on point. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of a bit all over the place for me, this album. Like, there's so much I love about the production across so many of the tracks. And yet, you know, other elements just kind of fall behind and don't really enamor me at all. It's a bit of a frustrating one. I don't think we're getting the best of Quelle Chris's rapping ability here. There aren't really that many quotables that stand out. There aren't many memorable verses to me, memorable performances. Even some of the best performances, like the Earl feature, I think is really good, but I don't think I'd ever come back to this track just for that. Like, I'd go to so many other Earl features or Earl performances before I would to this one. Chris Keys does add a lot to the production, but it's just not enough to save it. I think this is a bit of a disappointing release, to be honest. So for the second day in a row, I guess I'm going 5.5 out of 10. Bit of a shame, but it is how it is, I suppose. I know a lot of people are loving this though, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I guess I haven't delved that much deeply into the lyrics or unpacked much from the lyrics, but to be honest, I think with the performances that just didn't grip me in any way, it was hard to really focus on some of the lyrics. And I know that there are other reviews out there as well that'll go really nicely into detail with a lot of Chris's words, because I know obviously there'll be people that like this more than me. So I suppose you can skip my review if you want. Please tell me what you think of this album. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree, disagree, whatever. What's your favourite Quelle album? That'll be a good comment as well. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Goodbye.